Whenever I go back and play Breath of the Wild, I'm always surprised as to how great the game looks. It holds up incredibly well more than 5 years later. It's a masterpiece in many ways, including visually, I would say. And it just gets me even more excited for what's to come with Tears of the Kingdom. But not everyone feels the same way. A lot of people take a look at the Switch and think about how dated the hardware is and how much more powerful other systems are. And they don't think that Tears of the Kingdom will look or perform that much better than Breath of the Wild. Well, I disagree, and I actually think there's quite a bit of evidence suggesting that Tears of the Kingdom is going to have much better graphics than you might think. And that's what we're talking about today.
Hey, listen!
Welcome everyone, this is On This Restart, and we're going to be talking about how Tears of the Kingdom is going to look a lot better than some of you may think. And in doing research for this video, I actually noticed quite a few different things that were kind of surprising to me once I took a closer look at it. So we're going to be talking about some of the logical reasons as to why Tears of the Kingdom is going to look a lot better. We're also going to be going into this patent that you may have heard about, but it seems like many may have been misinterpreting. And also, we're going to be doing some comparisons from Breath of the Wild to Tears of the Kingdom, and I'm going to be showing you how Tears of the Kingdom is very clearly going to be looking a lot better than Breath of the Wild, and Nintendo's been holding back on us, and when we finally get to see this game in full, it's going to be really impressive. Even if it is just for the Nintendo Switch, it's going to be a big deal. So let's first dive into the history of Zelda games and Nintendo impressing. When it comes to Zelda, there's usually some sort of big tech demo that Nintendo shows off, and we see this tech demo and we're like, whoa, so this is what's possible on the next big Nintendo system. And then they finally come out with the actual game, and it looks substantially better than that tech demo. And I bring up this point to illustrate that the Zelda team and Nintendo are always working hard to improve things and do everything they can to push the system to the limit. So whatever sort of proof of concept or idea they may have had for what could be possible for Zelda in the system, they always find a way to go beyond that. It's partly why Zelda games always take so long, because they're doing everything they can to make these games as great as possible. But in the case of Tears of the Kingdom, you may say, well, there isn't any tech demo for Tears of the Kingdom, so this point does not matter. Well, there may not be a specific tech demo per se, but there is a predecessor, and that's Breath of the Wild, the original. They are building off of Breath of the Wild as a base here. And this isn't the only instance we've had of Nintendo building off of a predecessor. We also have Ocarina of Time to Majora's Mask. Majora's Mask looks noticeably better than Ocarina of Time, and it took them less than 2 years to make this sequel, and they did an incredible job. Of course, Majora's Mask had the advantage of the RAM expansion that allowed the game to look and perform better. So some of you may argue that the Switch doesn't have any sort of advantage. There is no RAM expansion. Well, no, but Breath of the Wild was not made ground up for the Nintendo Switch. Breath of the Wild was made ground up for the Wii U, and then at the very tail end of development, they ported over to Switch and scrapped a whole bunch of Wii U concepts, including using the Sheikah Slate alongside with your gamepad. And the Switch is more powerful than the Wii U. It has better CPU, it has better GPU, it has better RAM. It is more powerful pretty much across the board by any metric. So, a game made specifically for the Switch from the ground up is going to run better than Breath of the Wild did on the Switch. But it's not just about the Switch being more powerful, but also the amount of time. Majora's Mask was made in less than 2 years, and that was a different time. But now we're looking at Tears of the Kingdom, using Breath of the Wild as a foundation, and this has been the longest gap between major Zelda games ever. More than 6 years. And the advantages of this long development time doesn't just mean a whole bunch of new concepts and ideas and content that are going to be fun, but also years of optimization and mastering the system and getting a better handle of how to push it to its limits. There have been continual advancements on how to better utilize hardware over these years, and it shows. You take a look at games like Fire Emblem Engage, which looks better than the first Fire Emblem game for Switch, Three Houses, by a substantial margin. Splatoon 3, a sequel to Splatoon 2, another game that was built ground up for Switch. It looks noticeably better. And then there's Xenoblade Chronicles 3, another internally developed Nintendo game like Splatoon and Fire Emblem that has a follow-up to a game that was also built up for Switch early on in the generation. All of these sequels look better than their original Switch counterparts. And this in large part has to do with developers having a better handle on the system and coming up with different ways to improve the visuals. For example, Monolith Soft has been using some technologies to improve the overall image quality for Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Now, I may make reference to a few graphical terms here and there throughout the video, but I'm going to be simplifying them so everyone can understand, and I'm not trying to pretend to be like a super tech-savvy person. Some of these graphical terminologies that I'll be bringing up, I got feedback from in preparation for this video with Brandon, and I'll be linking his Twitter in the description below. But anyways, what Monolith Soft has used in Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is called temporal anti-aliasing upscaling. So temporal anti-aliasing has been used in different games, and it's used to basically kind of clean up the image. So you may see like those lines that are kind of pixely or sparkly and they make things look a little fuzzy. Well, anti-aliasing cleans up those edges, it rounds it up. But the temporal anti-aliasing upscaling, Monolith Soft is using it in Xenoblade Chronicles 3 to actually improve the overall image quality, which is why Xenoblade Chronicles 3 looks like it has a lot nicer resolution than Xenoblade Chronicles 2. And this is just an example of the different things Nintendo has been doing to improve the quality of their games over these last few years. And I would say especially in this last year, these games look a lot better. But something else that I think is important to bring up here is that while we have seen these sequels take a leap from their predecessors, other games that were also made ground up for Switch, Tears of the Kingdom should be seeing an even larger leap because its predecessor, Breath of the Wild, was not made ground up for Switch, but the previous system, the Wii U. In other words, instead of just looking at it as an improvement from early gen to late gen, it's actually arguably an improvement from the best of last gen to the best of this gen for Nintendo systems. Nintendo's always coming up with ways to improve technologies like other companies, even with graphics. So with that in mind, I think we should briefly talk about this patent here, because everyone's been talking about it. This patent may not even be for Tears of the Kingdom. Let's just clarify that first. The reason some people are hoping it is because one of the inventors for it is Akashi Miyagi, who worked on Twilight Princess, a previous Zelda game. And I'll say that considering that Tears of the Kingdom is an ambitious Nintendo game, maybe the most ambitious they got going on right now, a relatively recent patent within the last couple years that's meant to make it easier to have better graphics and performance, there's a decent chance they may be employing with Tears of the Kingdom. But I've also noticed a lot of people talking about this patent and seeing that it may improve overall image quality and thinking that this may mean something like DLSS, which from what I'm seeing isn't really what it is. And by the way, DLSS is basically, in a very, very simplified way, it uses deep learning to take an image and improve the overall image quality, basically improving the resolution from say maybe 1080p to 4K, for example, with less processing power. But this is something that can't be done because the Switch doesn't have it within its system. It would maybe be on the next Nintendo system. So some people are hoping that maybe they can come up with like a cheaper version of this to put within the Switch itself. Well, first let me say there are different things that Nintendo has been coming up with. We just talked about how in Xenoblade Chronicles 3 they're using some sort of upscaling to improve the overall image quality. And considering that Monolith Soft works directly with the Zelda team, they may use this technology with Tears of the Kingdom. But I don't think that's what this patent's about. I took a look at this patent, I looked at some of the Japanese translations and went over it with Brandon, who's more tech savvy than me. And I do think it does mean great things, but it's maybe not what people are suggesting. So the summary line here is an image processing method for expressing objects with transparency with a low processing load. And I'm not going to pretend to understand every single nuance and detail of this patent, but from what I vaguely come to understand, there are a number of different applications that can be used to improve surface detail with less processing power to do so. It can be used to improve the overall look of crystals and imagery that may be behind it via transparencies, again with less processing power. And yes, this will overall make the game look and run better, but it's just one of many examples of Nintendo looking for ways to improve technologies over time, which I think just supports the idea that Tears of the Kingdom coming out more than 6 years after Breath of the Wild stands a great chance of looking and running a lot better. But now let's go into some actual comparisons from what we've seen so far in Tears of the Kingdom compared to Breath of the Wild. So something that you could say that was an issue with Breath of the Wild was its texture filtering. It used an old bilinear texture filtering, and when you look at the gameplay, if you look carefully, you can see multiple lines where the detail changes drastically not too far from Link. Now, I don't feel like I can confirm 100% that this isn't in Tears of the Kingdom, but from all the footage we're seeing here, we're not seeing any sign of that from what I can tell. And considering that Tears of the Kingdom is a far newer game, it's unlikely you're going to be seeing that same style of filtering the textures where you see those lines throughout the gameplay. Now, something else that I think looks a lot better in Tears of the Kingdom is the lighting and the shadows. When we take a look at the footage of the torch in the first trailer, the way the light bounces off the area, including the characters, looks a lot more natural, at least compared to the lighting we saw in Breath of the Wild. Now you may say, oh, that's just a cutscene, but something you may notice about the trailer, they never say, oh, game footage not final, or footage in development, or this does not represent the final game in any way. Like, they didn't say anything like that. Presumably this is all in-engine footage, which is typically how they show all Zelda game footage. It's all in-engine, something that's capable of actually happening within the engine itself. When we take a look at some of the cavernous areas, it's clear that the lighting that's in place with this underground area has a lot more going on, and it looks a lot more realistic, at least based off what they're showing, compared to what we've seen, for example, in Breath of the Wild. We actually see lights that cast shadows in the Tears of the Kingdom footage, something that didn't happen in Breath of the Wild. So let's go ahead and take a look at something a bit more obvious. So I took this shot from the latest trailer from Tears of the Kingdom. You can see the Thunder Plateau to the left, you can see the Gerudo Highlands, these red cliffs in front of Link as he's flying down from very high up, somewhere far higher than you can typically go in Breath of the Wild. But I tried to get as close as I could in Breath of the Wild to this area, and I took some direct footage, and here are some snapshots comparing the areas. When you look at them side by side, it's very clear that there's a lot more detail in Tears of the Kingdom that we can see from a lot further out. Here, even with a much closer up footage of the Gerudo Highlands, you can still make out more detail from far further out in Tears of the Kingdom of the same area. Take another look at these tall tree mushroom-like structures from the Thunder Plateau in the Tears of the Kingdom shot. Now look at this footage in Breath of the Wild as we fly down to this same area. We still can't quite make out the shadows until we get really close. You can make out a lot of the shadow detail from that high up in Tears of the Kingdom. Being able to make out all of these details and see all these things from that far out is going to make a big difference for the exploration in this game. If there's going to be an emphasis on sky exploration and perhaps beyond, the scope of this game is going to be far larger than Breath of the Wild, which is going to be impressive in and of itself, but to see so much more detail from so much further out, that's also going to make a really big difference. So when you take that into consideration, along with improved lighting and shadowing and what seems to be improved texture filtering as well, and when you consider how long this game has been in development, and how all major Switch sequels have been significant improvements, and we haven't even seen a ground-up built Zelda game for Switch yet, there is a lot going in favor for Tears of the Kingdom to look and even run better than Breath of the Wild. Tears of the Kingdom is going to look really good for a Switch game, or just period, because when I go back and play Breath of the Wild today, I still think it looks pretty special. I think it's aging quite well thanks to its art style. I think Tears of the Kingdom is going to take it to a whole other level. It is going to be by far the most impressive Switch game to date. And it's just exciting to think about how quiet Nintendo has been. I think this isn't a nervous quiet. This is a confident silence. And they know once they reveal it, it's going to blow our minds. That's what I think. I'm excited for this game. We are so close. I can't wait. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Anyways, everyone, this is On This Restart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care.